Hey, we're live. Ah, this is This Week in Amplio. I'm Brian Erickson. The topic is imagine this. Agile. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Well, maybe it does. I don't know. I don't know what you think it means. Good now. And we shall, in this episode today, have our friend, my friend, your friend, and mine, Mr. Al Shalloway, who is going to talk a bit about what is after this thing that what is this thing called Agile, and what is after that? And we already have a comment in the comments who is saying this is what since 2016 it's been after Agile. So with that, Al, welcome as always every week. What is on your mind?
Well, I've got quite a few, and thanks for having me, Ryan, and thanks for me being here too. Especially, we had a kind of a slow last couple of weeks. I went to Pittsburgh to see Bruce Springsteen. I'm crazy about him, but my wife is more insane. Let me tell you.
Did you do one of those 4-hour kind of?
It was only 3 hours. It was only 3 hours.
Jeez.
And it was wonderful. And we enjoy that. We're going to actually see him in Vancouver in November. We go around the places. That's one of our big things. He's what's the word? Kind of a spiritual guide to me in some ways. Just watching him do what he does reminds me that, hey, that's how you live your life. You do what you do. You own what you own, and just be proud of it, and don't worry about the detractors. And but anyway, so it's been kind of a slow week because I'm recovered from COVID, so no worries about me. I'm doing fine. This one wasn't even that bad because I do get vaccinated, and I took a little long getting the booster, so I caught it somewhere. But Paxlovid, because I am a 3-way high risk for it, but I've had it twice now, and both times it's been all right. But anyway, I had an interesting, even though it was like a light couple of weeks, some interesting things happened, and there are 3 things to talk about. Well, maybe 4. There were 3 things we mentioned to talk about, which is, I'm not going to actually talk about what is Agile, because to be candid, when I was at the 10-year anniversary of Snowbird, that was the 10-year anniversary of the manifesto for Agile. I wasn't at the first one, but I was brought in for the second one because David Anderson and I had started Lean Kanban University. So Kanban was the next thing kind of at the time. And back then we couldn't agree. So the Agile Manifesto folks couldn't agree. So I'm not going to talk about it. Okay. Yeah. Many of you know, I don't believe the Agile Manifesto is its definition. I need another pair of glasses because I haven't been doing what's in there for a long time, well before 2011, and doing something more effective. And what I want to do is just let's look at the intention of Agile, which is wonderful and brilliant. And the manifesto is amazing in getting us on a path. But we've had some challenges now. And what I wanted to look at is what I believe is one of the problems is that we're not taking advantage of what's known. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff that people are complaining about having problems. And I believe every one of them is due to, well, not every one that people complain about, but I'm going to give you a list of about 14 in a minute. I believe they're all due to 2 reasons. One reason is that it's not widely known how to really do this stuff, building value for customers effectively. It's not well known. None of the frameworks cover the important things.
And you're talking about methods and practices and kind of at this engineering level.
It's kind of a combination of mindset and methods. There's a lot of mindset that needs to be done that's not in the Agile space. In fact, some of the mindset in the Agile space, I would say, is kind of wrong, but I'm not going to go there. But yeah, methods, understanding what I call first principles, or what are called first principles. I didn't make them up, like delays in your workflow will cause waste. Multitasking makes you less efficient. These are things that are just the way it is. And we don't live by these. In fact, a lot of people deny they're there because they think, oh, we're in a complex adaptive system, so you can't figure out cause and effect. And by the way, I'm not alone in this. Had conversations with Don Reinertson, Tom Gelb. Look at Ellie Goldrat's Inherent Simplicity. He talks about this explicitly. Complexity obscures things from us. But let's say you're on a ship and you've got 3 holes in the boat, but you don't know that. You only have 2. You only know of 2. And I'm using this as a metaphor. Say the 3rd hole in the ship is hidden because of complexity. It's just where you can't get to it. Well, if you plug the first hole, you may not even notice that you made a difference. You plug the second hole, you notice, hey, we're still leaking. There's something else here. So you may not get the exact result you want, but it doesn't mean looking at cause and effect of first principles doesn't get you knowing to get to a better solution. You don't have to run. You know it's going to help you if you close the hole in the boat. You don't need to run an experiment. Gee, let's see if this will help. There may be other things that you can't see. That's the whole idea of inherent simplicity. There are a few things, cause and effect. Doesn't mean you see them all. You have to discover what you can't see, and complexity obscures. Anyway, I'm going a little too deep in this.
Well, no, it's called. I would think in hearing that from the lean movement, and one of the foundational works is learning to see.
Learning to see is a big piece of this. Exactly. And in manufacturing, it's quite different than in product development, because in manufacturing, you're trying to do the same thing over and over again and reduce variability in manufacture. That's in manufacturing. In product development, you've got a lot of variation. You want to actually take advantage of the variation at times, but there are still principles there, and you have to find them. This is why sometimes taking things straight from lean manufacturing into lean product development doesn't make any sense. I mean, that's how it was done 20 years ago, and it was a good first start, but it's not really the best way to go now. So I suggest, in fact, why don't you go ahead and put that list up so people can see what I'm talking about. So I was just thinking, this was off the top of my head. I could probably come up with another 30 or 40. These are things, I wrote this post, these are things that people are always complaining about, and people are trying to, they're kind of befuddled, and they often blame people like, oh, management's bad, and, that's why we're having these troubles and things like that. The thing is, though, that management's not educated in a lot of things. In the same way we aren't educated, they're not educated, and this can be a real issue. And I've been kind of saying this, but there was a really nice post by Krishna Kumar this morning on LinkedIn that just kind of hit me, where he says, many management dysfunctions we see can be traced back to the fact that managers don't understand how to manage queues and queuing. And we're not educating these people. And by the way, most of the big successes I've had were always led by management. When I educated them, they're very much wanting to move forward. Managers are not these ill-motivated people. They're just not necessarily properly positioned for their work. And this is
ignorance is not necessarily, it is what it is, because you don't know, you don't know, and you have, I mean, it sounds like a first principle to me.
It is kind of, actually, and it's true for developers. We get a lot of crappy code because developers have somehow got the idea they can do what they want. I'm saying, no, you better follow first principles of coding too, or you're going to get crappy code, which you get a lot of the times. You can't just decide, I'm going to write this way because I like to write this way. This whole idea of autonomy has been misunderstood. Yes, I agree in autonomy. I agree people make decisions, but you have to relate to the reality of both program and process.
And it's agreement, isn't it? I mean, it is agreement among peers on roles, goals, and standards, for lack of a better term.
Well, that's
a development standard.
If they agree to crap, it's still crap.
Well, if everyone is
everyone does in teams.
Well, but I'm saying, if you have varying levels of proficiency and competency and all that kind of stuff.
What I mean is, yeah, you're right. But what I mean is that if a team doesn't want to do automated testing, say, or they don't want to do tests first, consider your tests before you write your code. I'm not talking TDD necessarily. And they all agree to that. Well, it's still going to be the wrong thing to do.
Say more.
Well, there are things called code qualities that if you pay attention to, your code is better. And if you don't pay attention to, it's not better. It's just the way it is. Now, people don't like to acknowledge this because developers, and I speak from past experience, like to do it the way they like to do it. And at some point, you got to recognize that maybe that's not the best way to do it just because you like it. But I don't want to go down that path either.
So, right. Yes, we're already going there, but that's okay. I'm always okay with the wandering.
No, but it's good. It's good because this points out, well, then what the hell do you do? Because we're not talking about mandating things. No, I'm not talking about that. See, it's almost like these two, we go to extremes. I remember going into Don Reinertson and I once were at a conference together. It was a long time ago, about 15 years, maybe not that long, but there was this big discussion about like flow and sprints and complexity and not complexity. And it was this or that or this or that. And he kind of lowers his head and whispers in my ear, these people have been around zeros and ones too long. And I just, so it's not like you
not
have
analog enough.
Yeah, we have no analog here. It's not like you have full freedom or you get it exposed, you get it imposed to you. No, it's not 0 or 1. It's you have freedom to decide how to work, but you have to pay attention to reality. If you build a bridge and the designer says, well, I'm trying to keep it less expensive, so I'm not putting any redundancy in, don't cross that bridge. See, people have learned in the physical world how things work, and they have what they have first principles, laws of physics things, and they don't violate those, and we can't violate those. So this could be a very good conversation later, but I want to get to 2 other points. But this good. I'm glad you brought this up, Ron, because this is what I'm talking about. You have to pay attention to this stuff. And everything that's there, and I'm not going to go into how to fix this, but if you go to the post, you'll see underneath that, I have a list of 14 things for each one of those things, what causes them. Now, there might be other factors, and it's not really a one-to-one. But my point is this. There's a lack of education, a lack of knowledge, a lack of awareness, a lack of how-to in the agile space, whatever that means to you, at all levels, executives, managers, consultants, doers, practitioners, teams, whatever.
Among this body of knowledge, maybe we'll say.
The body of knowledge that really makes a difference. Now, first of all, most of the body of knowledge that really makes a difference is rare. It's not, half of it's not even in the frameworks. The things I found worked over the last 20 years of studying what worked and what didn't work. I conducted thousands of interviews with people, and I distilled what works by talking to them what it works. That's what Amplio is. Amplio is not like my thing. It's a integration, a distillation of thousands of people saying what works or not. It's not a framework. It's a thought process, an approach that has kind of default settings. So if you want a quick start like a framework, great. Like we're currently building. One thing we did this week, we're working on this thing called the Scrum Quick Start with Amplio, which is as easier, actually more fit for purpose than starting with Scrum, but then you never have to transcend it. You just keep adding things. So this idea that you need a framework to make it simple, or you go abstract and it's really complicated, is no, you can get from the base of theory and give a starting point. This is theory, verifiable theory, meaning you can verify it, verifiable theory and empiricism put together the experience. Without an understandable theory, it's been shown people resist and don't pick things up. And you see that with a lot of these complaints, why managers don't collaborate. Well, they don't believe what you're saying. I've talked about Semmelweis any number of times, so I'm not going to again, but if you're interested, that was one of the best examples. Find them on Wikipedia.
And again, resistance it's more than just that. It's a lack of understanding and a challenge. Like, I don't understand this. And if it doesn't end with, can you explain? And someone who's evidencing this kind of silent, I don't know, I'm resisting. It is not necessarily that. Again,
resistance
human being, it's a lack of understanding and a want to know.
That's right. Resistance is not a bad thing in and of itself. I mean, I'm going to tell my kids not to walk up to the lion cage and put their arm in the cage to pet the little kitty. I mean, some things are bad to do. But resistance because you don't understand is something else. It means that there are good things to do that you're not. Ellie Goldratt sums this up in that control has less to do with a comfort zone than it does to do with knowledge. And by that, what he means is that we tend to stay focused or stasis where we are because we don't understand why we should change. So much of the resistance that's created in the agile space is due to the fact that, well, look, our most popular framework where everybody learns what to do, Scrum, they talk about, well, we're just using empiricism. It's purposely incomplete. Follow till you understand. I mean, those are the worst things you could do to try to increase understanding, and it's really costing us. But this is the symptom. We don't understand. Maybe 2 of them. One is it's not been widespread. Because what to do, how to fix this? is well understood. And by that, I mean, it's not like I have the answer. And sometimes people say, Al, you're always saying you have the answer. Well, I have an answer. Yes. I don't have the answer. I keep listening lots of people, Wolfram Mueller, Peter Merrill, Steve Tendon, Mike Kottmeyer, and he's got a fairly good sized consulting company in Atlanta. Steve Dennis, haven't talked to him in a while, but when I did talk to him years ago, he's a good guy. And there are others. There are a lot of other people. But the problem is our education system. This is the cause, in my mind. We're so much after certifications now that everything has been done as short workshops, like a 2-day workshop. Now, have you ever found a university where they've been in the education business longer than anybody, universities as a whole?
Yeah.
So when I took courses in universities, I would take 3 courses over 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they could have jammed one course into a couple of weeks. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they then give me another course in a couple of weeks? Why didn't they do that?
You need to absorb. You need well, it is so important to build skills and to build knowledge and to build understanding. It's not like we can be programmed as if we are digital processing devices.
Well, then why do we train people like that's what they can be done? See, this is the irony to me of Agile, is it's supposed to be about people, but we train them like they're automatons.
Yeah. Well, and I think maybe this is part of the one of the many deficiencies and kind of the empty parts of the manifesto is that it doesn't. You're right. It doesn't account for learning and in what environments are teams most. Yeah. What is a positive learning environment? I maybe alluded to, giving folks the tools they need to do their job, and then and let them go. Well, I don't know about that. There has to be some teacherly authority around.
Well, there has to be. Well, I don't believe in authority, even as a teacher, to be candid. But that's another issue I'll get to in just a second.
Well, we can talk. Yeah, I mean, there's a definitional thing there. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, but I want to put in a little caveat here, because I don't want to. I'm not saying that 2-day workshops and 4-day workshops are bad or things like that, because they have their place. If you have a 2-day workshop, a 3-day, 4-day workshop, and it's about shifting your mindset, or if you're about to do something, or if you're about to actually work on your work, like a 4-day product management workshop, that's good stuff. But if you're going to a 2-day workshop to learn information or process or practices, then that's, like you say, I don't have any chance to think about it. Now,
see, my belief, it's learning the rules to basketball and not having to play it for 3 months.
Yeah, it's like that doesn't make any sense. So anyway, it's kind of like this. The comment about authority, though, is important. So one of the things I always tell people when I start a training course, or I sometimes forget, is I say, I'm going to make a lot of assertions over the next few hours. And now an assertion, the definition of a technical definition of assertion is, I'm saying I'm going to make a statement that I say is true and that I have evidence to prove it's true. Okay. So it's not an opinion. This is like right here, there are 2 people on the screen. That's an assertion. And we could get people to agree that there are 2 faces and we're talking, et cetera, et cetera. But then I say but I'm not going to give you the evidence. You're going to give me the evidence. And the reason is this: if you can give me the evidence, then you believe it. And if you can't give me the evidence, then we have a good conversation. Because now, why is your experience different than what I'm saying? Why is your experience not verifying the theories? That's why I call it verifiable theories, because I'm saying they can verify it. See, now we have a good conversation, because maybe I stated it wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. So the point is, Einstein was a really smart person, but he had no authority. Nobody said, oh, Einstein said it, so it's got to be. Well, people in college probably said it. His peers didn't say it.
Well, the people who opted into playing the Einstein game opted into it because he had knowledge that they wanted to receive.
That's right.
There's respect for his teacherly. That's what I mean by teacherly authority.
Okay,
someone has
that's
the knowledge.
True. You thank you for clarifying that. So you do have an openness that, hey, maybe this guy knows something that I don't know, but I'm not going to believe anything he says. I've had a long running battle with, I don't know, I call it a battle with Don Reinertson over years, where I would disagree with him all the time. And he appreciated it because I was doing it respectfully. I would say, Don, I don't understand this. Tell me more. In fact, I disagree with this because tell me more. And the score, we weren't really keeping score, but if we were, it'd be something like Don Reinertson 100, Al Shallowy 0.
Not a good record. Not you wouldn't make the major leagues with that.
No. But you know what? I learned more than Don.
Yeah. Well,
He said, actually, something I remember one time asking him, I said, Don, why do you like to talk to me? Why do you like to talk to me when you're the one who always knows what...
You're a masochist. No.
No,
and that you, because that continual proof that in basic, I think we talked about this also. He's giving you a little more than you almost know.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And then you're being curious, and I want to keep going because there's tension there. And he builds the respect in his teacherly authority.
Right. And the truth is, good educators like doing that. They like it when people learn around them. That's what he didn't say it quite that way, but that's pretty much what he meant. That, well, he said he likes talking to me. I talked to Tom Gill once or twice a week, and it started out like for the first year or so, it was like, man, I was getting everything from him and I wasn't giving much back. And I asked him about it. He says, well, he's there to help other people make a difference in the world. And he saw that's what I was trying to do. But over time, I've learned. And now it's really interesting conversations, and we've co-created a lot of things. But anyway, so here's my issue. What if these things, and they're not that many, I mean, they're not 3 or 4, but they're not hundreds. What if these things were known by most everybody as a matter of course? Now, what would that take? Okay, that would take, I think, 2 things. Well, 3 things. One is it would take an extremely low cost, like 10% of what education costs now. The second thing is it would have to take place over time so people could try things out and learn them. Mm-hmm. And the third thing, it would have to include a support system, because we need that. And part of the content would also have to be not just what the information is, but how do you convey the information? See, this is what the manifesto kind of left out. Left out 2 major things, besides being overly team-centric and ignoring management. It left out systems thinking. So where Agile has gone off the rails has mostly been because people haven't attended to the behavior of systems, that when something goes wrong, it's not the people as much as the system. Like culture eats strategy is an example of that. So without this, it's been like kind of a free-for-all, without this knowledge of that there's a science here. So anyway, 3 things: low cost, extremely low cost, over time, and an integration not just of how the concepts are, but how you learn and continuously learn. This, by the way, and I'm not meaning this to be a plug. Well, I am meaning for this to be a plug for Amplio, but there's a side point. This is exactly how Amplio is designed to meet. It's to meet these three qualities. It's why it's priced at $1,000 for 6 months with 120 hours of live sessions. It's why it's over time, like 6 months. And it's why it's got integrated coaching. But here's the beauty of it. And I want people, I realize I've got to write about this. It's not a framework, and it's not even an approach. It's more like a radio. You can tune it into anything you want to, and you could preset dials if you want a quick start. You can apply it to anything, anywhere that has to do with knowledge work.
Well, I think we talked about this in the first episode, but again, people wander in here who may or may not know again what we're talking about. I think the way I continue to relate to it is there's a vocabulary, there are phrases, and then there are stringing of phrases together to make sense of something, to convey ideas.
That's right.
That just because you know the alphabet and know a few words doesn't mean you can string those things together into coherent ideas that even can be communicated with someone based on pronunciation, all that kind of stuff. And I think that is the treatment of the manifesto as this program that you can plug in and do something. So I think that maybe when you make the distinction between what's a framework, what's an approach, what is this, I think that's important to make that distinction. Say, if Amplio is not a framework, how do you define what a framework is, and what is that difference? I know we're taking it left, but
I mean, how do I define what Amplio is? Because it's not a framework. So we know what frameworks are. So
Well,
here's
yeah,
what Amplio is.
I want to make sure, because some people say,
So
"Oh,
how do I
Scrum's
define
not a
a framework?
framework." Yes. How
Okay.
do you define a framework?
So
Yeah,
I
okay,
define a
it's not.
framework in the standard set. It's in the physical world. It's it's a physical structure that you build everything on. In the knowledge work, it's a set of practices and principles and how things interact, and you set it out. Here's the framework within which I'm going to work. Here's the structure. Here's the thought process. Here's the given stuff I'm going to work. And actually, frameworks are quite useful because they create clarity and you know what you're doing. The problem is when they're immutable, when they don't change, then it's rare that they're going to be fit for purpose. And for one time, I actually considered I called Amplio an adaptable framework. In other words, it's a framework that here's all this thought process, but here's what we're doing at the moment. So at the moment, this is the framework you're using. So it would create an adaptable framework.
Yeah. Well,
So
it's the rule. I mean, it's and Scrum says that on the label to the bottle. It's the rules of the game.
it's the rules of
Right.
the game, except it's more than the rules of the game because it also is the structure. It tells you um, it tells you how the people are, what the practices are, how people are supposed to be organized. So you could say, well, the rules of the game are a framework. Do you consider physics a framework? Well, in some sense, I guess you could, because you're saying, well, we're going to live within the laws of thermodynamics and not do things that say we don't. So in that sense, you could say physics is a framework. And in that sense, you could say Amplio is a framework. So maybe the distinction is it a framework of practices, which Scrum is? Now they're not totally, you do have to have sprints. That's a practice. It doesn't tell you exactly how to implement it. You'd have to have cross-functional teams. Does it tell you how? So a framework, as I'm meaning, is a framework of things that say how to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And Scrum also leaves off the why, which complicates things a bit. Okay, so if you say that's a framework, then Amplio's framework, but see, Amplio's kind of so structured differently, it's hard to. So let me tell. So if something has the rules of the game and the rules of the game have specifics to it and not principles that you're guided by, I'll call that a framework. So let me tell you what Amplio is, because I love what you said about putting together letters into words, into sentences. If you look at all the possible solutions out there, they must number in the thousands, if not millions. Trying to be complete about that would be absurd. It's mind-boggling. It would overwhelm people. So when you're talking about getting some sort of coverage or framework, a place to think about, the question is, you got to recognize there's only so much people can handle, which means you got to get it down to a few things. Well, when you stop to think about it, there aren't that many things that go wrong. It sure feels like that at times. but this was something we noticed at Net Objectives, my former company before the PMI. It was around 2008, 2007, I think we discovered this as we went into different companies. And as I talked to a lot of people at conferences, was that if you took 100 companies at random, at least 80 of them would have about 80% of the same problems. And actually, that's understating it. In other words, most companies need to solve most of the same problems. Now, they have some variant. FDA regulation is added. If you got hardware, software, you got some new things. But over the years, I've identified at the team level about 30 things you have to do. Scrum's got about a dozen, a little more, but there are a few others they don't talk about that they should. At scale, there are about 50 things. Okay. For example, you should attend to value streams at scale. There are a bunch of things. You need to have some level of prioritization. But here's the point. Each of those things might be implemented in 50 different ways, but each of them shows up, if you're not doing them, as a kind of problem. People know problems. You're not no solutions. They know problems. So the thing is, my experience is that people have about the same 20, 30 problems at the team level and the same 40, 50 problems at the organization level. And that's a lot, but it's not unmanageable. So the question is, how do you go from problems to solutions? Well, you got to look at the context you're in, the issues, the forces. Yeah. Oh my goodness, I'm sounding a little bit like the solution to a recurring problem in a context. It's a pattern.
Maybe.
This is what Amplio is. It's organized as 30 patterns at the team level, 50 patterns at the organization level, a GPS to diagnose, to see where your problems are and which are the most important ones. and to create an improvement backlog, an improvement path, rather, not a backlog, but an improvement path. Or backlog might even be more accurate, because then you readjust it and all that. But anyway, you get the idea. And you can have a quick start. Oh, you want to do something like this. Okay, great. Just set all these solutions, these patterns to just start this way, or ask some questions to set it for your context. But so my point is this, and I want to kind of shift to the other thing that I found very interesting that happened this week. That's kind of mind-blowing to me. My point is this. There aren't that many things you have to know, but there are a few key things you better know.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a math table. I can have a 10 by 10 math table and know how to multiply 1 to 100, 1 to 10 by 1 to 10. Or I can learn multiplication. Now, the good news is it's not that hard to learn these things I'm talking about. And it's not, by spreading it out over time, people can take advantage of what they already know, or already almost know. See, you've heard this statement. There's what you know. There's what you don't know. There's what you don't know you don't know. But what I almost never hear is what you know, and you didn't know you knew it. See, that body of knowledge is huge.
Yeah.
And when you train over time and you start giving a little theory that now they can verify, oh, you know, I didn't know that before, but now I see. Yeah, it was always bad when I started something before I finished it, because I was trying to make use of the extra time I had, but then I got involved in these other things, and before I knew it, I was working on 6 things. Oh yeah, I understand. Multitasking is a bad thing. That's what I'm talking about. That's a training technique. Okay. Anyway, I want to make sure I talk about something. I'm gonna.
And we got to make sure we get. If you want to get to the 14, there's that. And
I didn't want to get to the 14. Actually, you want to get to the 14? Read my stuff. It's free.
Okay, and I put a link to the post in there.
So there's all sorts of. I have hours and hours and hours of free video that go all over most of this stuff. Some of it's in the ACE program, and I just haven't gotten around to making it public. But believe me, you could get days of free stuff from me. Okay, my commitment. Well, my overall commitment is I'm committed to lowering the cost of training by 90% and being 10 times more effective. That's what I've stated Amplio as. And we train in a different way, and it's live training. I mean, it's like live training for the cost of, I saw Scrum just came out with like 2 days of training for $75. Well, that's not bad. Or 4 hours rather of training, 4 hours of training for 75 self-study. Well, that's twice as expensive hour for hour as what I'm offering. I don't think it's good they did that, but you need live training. You need to talk to somebody when, hey, that was great, Al. I really liked that. But when I tried it, I fell on my face. What do I do now?
Well, and then this is, okay, so how it started, right? So if we do the how it started and how it's going, and then where it might be going, which was the context, what we're kind of talking about. It started with a set of values and principles. That's great. That's the knowledge that is being invited to learn, right? So, and then folks are left up to create whatever out of it, whether it was DA, whether it was again Scrum coming forth to say, oh, Scrum and Agile are together, and again less that safe, all that kind of stuff. And what it sounds like you're saying is that what is after this, what is after throw the knowledge out there and leave it to whatever happened, is that what's after this is a learning approach. After agility comes, I'm trying to think of a word for it, right? And after agile is education or knowledge building or
ongoing
something
learning,
like that.
Continuous improvement. Except I would say that, yes, this is what's happened over the last 20 years, that we've now learned theories of flow, theory of constraints, lean and stuff. But if you're just starting out, certainly don't go through the agile process, because it's way too expensive and not necessary. So I want to be clear. This is not like start with agile and then do this. I'm sorry.
We do not recommend supporting the agile industrial complex.
That's right.
Because it does exist. Because it does exist.
It does exist. And the focus on certification is killing us, but that's another story as well. So here, let me just summarize what I've said. There's a lot of stuff that's known. There's a lot of stuff that's almost not used. In fact, if you wanted to put the other 14 up there just so people can see what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Things like minimum viable and minimum valuable
Valuable.
increments, value stream management, a variety of things is barely getting used. Why definition of ready is a good idea. It's not a phase gate, as it's often talked about. It's make sure you don't start things before you should be starting things. And the Amplio community practice, which is free, happens most every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. And this next one is going to be very interesting, because this next one, I'm going to actually present a case study of a concept that I learned back in the 80s. Yeah. So there are all sorts. So what I did is the top 14 are listed in order. These 14 are listed in order. So there's a one-to-one relationship. And of course, it's not that simple, but I just was trying to make a point. Okay. And on this, there are just some things here that most of these are not in any of the frameworks that are out there. Few of these are unique to Amplio, but a couple are actually. A couple are. Okay, let me talk about something that happened this week that's very profound. You can take that off. They have the URL to go to. So in the 80s, I worked with an organization called LogoNet. They were an offshoot. I don't know, they were an offshoot of. There's a gentleman, Fernando Flores, and you've heard me mention his name, I think, in the past.
Yeah.
He's gone back to Chile. He had been the Secretary of State, I believe, of Chile when it was overthrown. I mean, decades ago in the 70s, whenever that was. And he came to the United States as a political prisoner. He was one of the most brilliant men I've ever known. I've known some brilliant men. I mean, seriously, like genius level people that I feel like I'm in kindergarten compared to a couple of these guys. One of the guys I worked with at IBM Research, we built at the time the most complex computer chip ever built at that time. This was in 78. And I could say that without taking any credit, because I was just the grunt Fortran programmer. He loved me because I could program super fast. But we predated neural nets in the late 70s. The guy was amazing. But anyway, Fernando Flores had this idea that, and unfortunately doesn't teach this anymore. I don't even know what he's doing in Chile now, but he did this for a few years in the United States. And I was like avid. I took everything I could from the guy, sometimes 2-3 times. Not that he was responsible for me not getting it. I don't mean that. Some of the stuff was deep. You just had to take it a few times. But one of the things that he said was that we create our reality in our languaging or speaking. And now I'm not going to get into the metaphysics of what Chopra talks about, which I actually agree with, that literally we first think about it and then it manifests around that. I'm not talking about that. He just means our view of the world out there. We don't see the world out there. We see our vision of it and our conversation about the world out there. And he called this listening. You're listening, not a verb, but a noun. Like if you're, what the hell is Al talking about? That's what I'm talking about. What the hell is Al talking about? That conversation in your head that's always running. That's what I'm talking about. And what happens is people look at things and they see different things. And we know this. I'm not going to get into politics, but there's a great example how yesterday to some of the world it was the best thing ever, and to some of the world it was the worst thing ever. Well, it was the same thing.
So, well, I think I've also heard this thing, and maybe this is saying the same thing in a different way. There's two things that come when you say that. So my listening, right? If you listen to my listening, which I think what you're saying is words create worlds.
Words create
one thing we've heard. And the other thing, it was we don't believe what we see what we believe. Again, the big we.
That's right.
The human species, right?
Now, there's a great movie about this, by the way, which is very funny, called The Gods Must Be Crazy, where this airplane flies over the Kalahari Desert or something, and there are these tribesmen out there, and he throws a Coke bottle out. In the days they had Coke bottles, and it comes down, and they discover this. Now, so the guy who threw it out, it was just a Coke bottle, but this came from the sky. And it had characteristics that nothing like it had ever had before. Now you can say, oh, those are just dumb Aborigines and what do they know? Except trust me, this is how we live our world. We see something, we know it's true, it's not. But to us, it is the reality. Our reality and the real reality are two different things. And he talked about how the way we communicate is if I say something and it evokes in you, Ryan, what I intended it to evoke, then we have some level of understanding. but misunderstandings happen because you hear the words differently than I intended them to be, or I'll point to that plain as day. You can see that, Ryan, and you see something different than I see. So the world you create with your worlds is different than the world I create with my worlds. Anyway, I did intense courses with this guy on this. And now at the time this was like 85, 86, 87. I've been programming for about 17 years. I was a really hotshot programmer. You know, I mean, I built several verticals in the 80s and 90s. I built actually a development system. Me and another guy were like two guys in the garage who didn't know anything about marketing. So we lost money building something way ahead of fourth generation languages. Seriously, it was amazing stuff. And we lost money. It's horrible. But so I had this tool that I could use. But what was really important is I understood that there wasn't this thing called a system in my software. And let me tell you how I got to this point. I can still remember this. It's so weird. It's like this image in my mind. This is like 40 years ago. And I can still remember where I was sitting and what the stage looked like. I was at this company that was part of Loganet. That was Fernando's company. I forget what these guys, they had a product though called the Coordinator. This was back in the 80s. They had a better email system back in the 80s than we have today. In fact, every now and then you get this improvement of threads and things like that. So shit, they're 10% further toward what they had back then. And this I think it got bought by Lotus Notes, and then it got bought by IBM. So it was kind of doomed to die. But anyway, the product, but the thought process behind it was this. I'm not going to describe the mail stuff, but I remember this guy was talking about languaging, and he says, we don't really speak words that have meaning. Rather, we use tokens. Like I'll say something. Like this woman came in. I remember this woman came in late. This is what triggered the whole conversation. And they were very kind of uptight, you might say, they weren't mean, but about being on time. So this guy said, why were you late? In a nice way. She says, oh, I had to get this gift for my mom. It's her birthday, and it'll make her happy. And the guy said, no, that gift will not make your mom happy. And the woman took a little offense to that. Says, what do you mean? Of course it'll make her happy. And I'm going to shorten the conversation. This took place over 10 minutes. Says, well, if I sent her to the gift, would it make her happy? No, she doesn't know you. Why would that make her happy? Oh, so it's not the gift. What is it? Oh, the gift will let my mom know I love her, and that will make her happy. So the gift was a token of this person's love.
And that token is a signal too, right?
Absolutely. Now, he was using a metaphor. The metaphor is when I speak words to you, the words in and of themselves don't have meaning. They're tokens of meaning that when you hear, you give the meaning to the words. Now, if I say something like iPhone, is a perfect example. If you like iPhones, oh, great phone. If you hate iPhones, oh, horrible phone. But it's the same word. Some people think Macs are overpriced. Some people hate Apple. Some people hate Microsoft. We are speaking.
Some people hate both and like Linux.
Exactly. So the point is, words don't have meaning. We give them the meaning. This is why we say we only see things we believe, because we see what we believe about the words or things that were just said to us. So anyway, so at the time, I was working on a particular package in the salon industry. And in the salon industry, these were people who had never used computers before. And I remember having some troubles. These guys didn't know software at all. And he was talking about this token, and he had a computer system next to him. Remember those really big PCs? I was like, yeah, you know, I have a 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet cube.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
not that big, but anyway. So I was looking at that, and I was hearing him say that there's no inherent meaning. And I'm thinking to myself, but that's not how I've been thinking about it. I have this system that I've built, and I know how this thing works, and it does exist this way. I've got these programs to prove it, and I could point to how this system works. But then it occurred to me, that's not what they saw. That's not what the customer saw. The user of the system was not seeing a system. The user of the system was seeing things come up on their screen, and the things they'd have to type to the computer, and that it would make more sense for me Instead of trying to explain how the system worked, it would make more sense for me to have the system interact with them as if I was in the computer. I remember visualizing, what if I was in that computer? What if I could be in every one of the computers? And when somebody said something, I responded to them like a human being. Like when they said sort 9A and 10, I would put 9A before 10, even though computers put 9A before 10 because the 9 comes before the 1. Or if you ever look at a PowerPoint and go into slide view mode and go about halfway in and then change the magnification, the zoom level, a human would expect that whatever that upper left PowerPoint was on the screen would stay there and the zoom would get bigger or little. But no, it changes position on you. Why? Because they have some algorithm that says if I'm at this percent in, and if you look at how horrible software is to use, it's horrible, almost always and not intuitive. Now, Mac stuff's usually a little better. They're not perfect, but this is why the iPad and all that was good. It took you 2 or 3 minutes. Said, oh, yeah, I see how it works. That was it.
Yeah.
But if you're always having to figure it out, it's because devs are building systems. And left brain folks, and I'm including me, it took me years to get over this. We think what we're building is the way it is. And when people don't understand that, they're wrong and they're stupid. There's so many conversations about stupid users. You could write books. In fact, they've written books on it. So the point is, I got this realization all of a sudden, wait a moment, there's no system here. This thing I wrote, this thing that could run hair salons, didn't exist to them as a system. What existed was their conversation about how they interacted with my system. And they would do something and expect something, and it wouldn't work the way they expected it. So therefore, that would confuse them. That would cause distrust in the system. And
well, it's making a promise that it's not keeping.
Actually, except that we don't make the promise because we tell them you're going to have to learn my system, right? We educate people on the system. But what you're saying is absolutely right.
It's an imposition.
It should be making a promise that they're not keeping. Yeah. So this is why people get very frustrated with computers, because they act weird. To them, they act weird because they don't understand how the system was written. Why would a programmer expect a customer to understand why would they expect the customer to understand how the system was written? So anyway, for years and years and years, I've used this knowledge to write incredibly simple to use, intuitive use, very good UX, all sorts of stuff. I've done this for decades. I mean, since the 80s, I learned how to do this. And I've always been saying, I'm going to write a course in this because nothing like this. It's not human-centered. It's kind of like design thinking to some level. It's kind of like humans. There are aspects of it, but it's different. But something happened this last week that actually is kind of cool. And I'm going to talk about a full hour on this one case study. I'm just giving you a taste of it. And this is an example of what I'm saying. We need to break what possibility. If you look at LinkedIn and you look at what we settle for, it's absolutely absurd. It's like eating an ice cream cone that's in the wrapper and there's some little slit that you get a little bit of ice cream. Say, oh, look how good this is. It's ridiculous. But anyway, so somebody made some comment about how you always have to throw stuff away with the customer. You got to run these experiments. You don't know what to do. And I always hate these experiments statements and you got to throw stuff away. And I thought about it. I said, wait a moment, Al. I wrote about over a dozen different vertical applications. I wrote like a rent-a-nurse, a hair salon, finance company. I've written, for a mortgage company, I wrote basically a full general ledger system. I've done lots of different verticals in my career. And every one of them, I had to throw away almost nothing. All I had to throw away were the details. Why? Because the details you can't figure out up front. But the business, the feature, the function, I always knew. So then I wondered, how the hell did I know? I'm not clairvoyant. And I'm not a mind reader. So how the hell did I know? And believe me, I'm a big agilist. I believe in thin slices and all that. I mean, TDD, I love TDD. Minimum valuable increments, I love. So what did I do? So I sat down and I looked at this. And what I noticed was that I basically did 6 things. The first thing I did was identified what the critical stakeholder, like who am I writing the system for? Is it for the user at the computer or is it the owner of the salon? Okay, but then I had to understand that. I had to understand the business they were in. Now, here's where I was pretty good. I had gotten a partnership with a hair salon distributor of supplies, and I knew their business. In fact, we even ran a routine, a school where I would help them run their business. At one point, I knew more about running hair salons and spas than most anybody in the world, seriously, because that's the business I was in, and we taught people how to do that. So I knew what was important to them, and I knew how their business worked. And then I realized, wait a moment, I can't write a system to explain. I need to work the way they work. Okay, but I've done this for a while. I also know that systems inform behavior. I need to attend to the customer value stream, not just how they think, but how they do their work. And then I need to write code that's changeable. I was a good programmer, so I could do that. So there was this thing we wanted to do that nobody had ever asked for. In fact, a lot of the salon people would say, we don't want it. And what it was in hair salons back in the day, on average, and we were talking top end salons, Veda, some others like that. We were in with the Veda back then, but top end salons, even independents, were with us. On average, they had an average retail sale of 4%. Okay, in other words, if they did $100 in services,
gross margin of 4%.
No, not profit. If I said profit, I didn't mean that. It's retail sales. In other words, if they did $100 of services, they would average $4 of retail for every $100 of services. You know, shampoo, how to take care of your perm, stuff like that. Amazingly low. That's what it was. And what we knew why. The reason was stylists kind of called themselves, well, I'm an artiste. I don't sell. You might have noticed nowadays this has changed. Well, we had something to do with this back in this was the mid 90s. There were some other people too, but this is the important piece I'm coming to, not whether we change the industry or not. But so we had this problem. Salespeople, stylists rather, didn't want to sell because they didn't sell. They weren't salesmen. They took care of their customers. But we knew that they wanted to take care of their customers, and we knew right products take care of your stuff. You know, you need products if you get perms or things like that to take care of it best. So what we looked at is we talked to a couple of owners. We actually owned the salon ourselves. That was part of the whole thing, learning curve. Learn your business. My distributor partner had a hair salon spa, so we could learn the intricacies of the business. That's where I actually trained my people so they would understand. I'd make them go there. And what I realized, what we came up with is, what if there was a report that you could give to people, the stylists, the people who didn't want to sell, so they could see what products would be most useful for them and just work it into their schedule so it didn't take any extra effort. And that's what we did. So I wrote this report. It took me just a few days. I wrote this report, got a little bit of feedback. However many days it took me to write it, I almost didn't throw anything away. I tweaked things. You got to tweak things, you know, that you throw away. So here's the point. Nobody had asked for this. We attended to system thinking. We took how they worked in their day-to-day operations. We took who they were and what they wanted to do. And we rolled this out to 100 salons. We did a few the first week, a few more. We did a few more each week. It took about 15 minutes of training to the owner of the salon, and then 15 minutes of training to the office manager who was responsible for information, and then 5 minutes of training to each stylist. And the results after a week was that 4% went to 13%.
And again, for me, just in mind, that means tripling the gross margin, basically, of that.
Well,
because that's
the margin is
it's revenue minus cost.
Yeah,
right.
That's 4.5% of profit, basically, because retail goes for they buy it for about 50% of what they sell it to. But here's the point.
The wholesale. Yeah.
Once I came up with this formula, this is another one. If you look down in my here, I'll give it to you. I'll give you the link to this. I wrote this post a few days ago, and I'm going to talk about this in detail because, okay, it was cool. Yeah, cool. You write good programs every now and then, but is it repeatable? And the answer is damn straight it is. Because once I realized what I did with this one, I went back and I said, well, this is what I did all the time. I would understand their business. If you have a client and you don't know if something you do is going to make a difference, then you don't understand their business. And why are you writing software where you don't understand the business of the people you're writing software for? Now, when you start thinking about it this way, when you start realizing they don't want to learn what you wrote, they want to work the way they want to work, that's effective. And you probably know how to do that better than them. See, that's what developers should be doing. They should be figuring out better ways for people to do their work. That's what Steve Jobs did for years and years at Apple.
You're doing innovation, you're innovating within the system because you understand the system and you're meeting an unarticulated need.
That's absolutely well said. That's perfect.
And this also goes kind of into you. I'm assuming you're familiar with Bob Moesta, the jobs to be done theory.
I probably heard it, but I don't remember right off the top of my head.
Well, it's kind of like they were just the example of it again. Well, I actually had something else I wanted to bring in here. It's kind of tricky, but the jobs to be done is that people were going to McDonald's and at the breakfast hour, and they were ordering milkshakes and drinking. Why were they ordering milkshakes at the breakfast hour? It didn't make sense. They wanted to have something for breakfast, something they could eat, but McDonald's at that point didn't have a breakfast
didn't have
menu.
that, yeah. Oh, so they noticed that, yeah.
The milkshake was doing the job of giving them breakfast on the road.
Perfect. And then, yes, I like that.
Then that happened to it. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And sometimes they don't know there's a better way.
Mm-hmm. And
sometimes they're viewing something in the wrong way. So the point is this. And by the way, on Tuesday, if you just look me up go to successengineering.works, and you'll see the next presentation up there. Make sure I actually have it up there, but I think I do. But here's the point. Yeah, the case study is right up there. Successengineering.works. But here's the point. I repeatedly in the 80s and 90s avoided all these errors people are talking is inherent. It's not inherent. And I've proven that case. You can say I'm wrong, except you can't make a blanket statement, something's inherent when somebody's got counterexamples. I got dozens of counterexamples. And it occurred to me that the real power of coming from the customer's perspective, as powerful as it is from the UX point of view, is even more powerful because to come from their perspective and to understand their business, then you know damn well what you ought to be writing, except for the little details. And the fact that we don't is only because our bar for what people need to know is so low and we're muddling through it. And this is my promise of Amplio. This is what I'm working on. Now, let's get this information out, low cost, over time, and be more effective and stop taking this low bar as, well, that's the best we can do. You look at LinkedIn and you'll see that almost all of the conversations about Agile are either what we can't do or how you solve a problem from a tactical solution. And it's very limiting. So anyway, I know we're kind of running out of time, but I wanted to get that message across. We need to get people better educated by lowering the cost of education. And by the way, by integrating it into the little bits. So that was the other thing we did at Amplio. I finally came up with this has been the biggest problem for me in the whole Amplio education. We solved it this week. I'm proud of myself. How do you have an ongoing study program? See, I don't start it every 6 months. It's ongoing. Anybody can join anytime. Well, how the hell do you do that? Well, that's been bothering me. So what we did, what I spent the week on is we now have an onboarding program. So the idea is you come in, you see, learn where things are. You can listen to old tapes, but you can join the new ones, and we learn together. And we figured out how to enable people to come in and spend their own time and spend as much time, anywhere from, you can spend a little as a couple hours. There are 6 hours a week, but not everybody goes to all of them. In fact, few do, but some do. But you can manage it. And how do you move at your own pace? So now we even know how to do that. See, this is the thing. I've been in this 2.5-year experiment of how to lower cost training while you can make it more effective. And I think the last piece kind of fell into place this week. So I'm pretty happy about that. Did we have any questions, by the way? I haven't really, I can't.
We had a couple comments.
Well, anything of interest for me to respond to?
Let's see. We have a response. Let's see the last one from Frederick. I think a statement, but worth putting up there. The one thing, again, bringing this in at 5922 is maybe a little unfair, but this past week, a post came up that I thought you might be interested in. I'm not sure if
Could
you
you put
saw
that
it.
up again? I didn't read it all. UX
No, that's me. This is
UX
it right here.
problems. No, UX problem has been around here forever. That may be exacerbating it. Yes, but anyway, keep going.
What I wanted to put up here is this one. Did you see that this week?
No, but I'm not surprised seeing who it's from. I love Scott.
Well,
Oh, I
and
saw
I
it. I
think,
saw it a week ago. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
I mean,
tend to agree.
he kind of drags the whole into the mud, and there's a calling out about it because this is part of bringing on the agile industrial complex.
It is.
I mean
It's killing us.
and he calls it out here. So, and what do we do about that? There's one school of thought that says, well, first of all, there is no agile community. It is a community of communities. Is no such thing as agile
That's true.
community. By the
part's
way,
true.
the oh crap, I came up with my thing. The oh crap, I do that all the time. Okay, forget it. It'll come back later. I'm squirreling out too.
Well,
Al.
there are a lot of problems in the agile community that I think people recognize, and the point is, agile from 2000 to about 2006, when it was focused on the team, was okay. And since then, it's so far behind what a lot of people out there are doing. I mentioned them already.
Yeah.
It's really pathetic when people keep putting all their money into it. I don't know how else to say it. And agile.
I mean, do you think part of that is the rise of multi-team enterprise software, kind of the ERP?
Well, yeah, I mean, agile you go back and read the manifesto. It's a team-centric approach with a customer telling you what to do, and that's just doesn't fit the world today. It didn't even fit the world as back as 2006 when we started getting at agile at scale. In 2006 was 3 teams, and I've gone into teams that were expert at Scrum. Jeff Sutherland had been there and had trained them, and one of the director of development there later became a CSD. And I went in there and they couldn't figure out how to get teams to coordinate. Why? Because that's not how you solve the problem. You get them to align. You don't get coordination is a symptom of a lack of alignment, by the way.
I would say alignment is a lagging indicator of a system of agreements. So that there has to be agreement. If I'm agreeing with you on that alignment, because to align is to impose on someone. Say, align with me, thou shalt.
There is a certain imposition of alignment. If you say in the company we're going to work on what's most important for the stakeholders that are most important, then people have to do that. You can't say, well, I don't like that idea, I'm going to go do my own thing. There is a position that's allowed.
Well, we could go somewhere else with that in terms of alignment with the purpose and the sphere of activity.
You don't want to tell people how to do their job, but you can tell them the direction you have to go. I've said this before. You cannot set up a side business with Microsoft selling furniture to people because you can get it cheap through their business office. They can buy things. That's not what Microsoft's about. Yeah. You know, you have to stay aligned to 2 things. To the business direction and to the reality of the world. And Agile has kind of forgot that second one and talks about let's not imposing. But anyway, that's another conversation. That could be another interesting conversation to have.
And there we go. And again, maybe we have a guest or something on that.
Yeah, I know who we're thinking about. I'd be willing to do it. That would be an exciting day.
We shall see. This is great, as it always is. A lot of fun for everyone who's out there. Several folks out there. We have some comments in there that came through. Really happy to have you here.
Yeah.
And
if you want to, and again, remember next Tuesday, 8:00 Pacific, I'm going to go in gory detail about this little piece I mentioned. The big thing is the education, but I wanted to tease that because when you do it right, it takes a lot less time and it's a lot faster.
Well, learn how to learn.
Learn.
Listen to other people's listening. How about that?
That's right. Learn how to learn how to listen to other people's listening.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Brian. Thanks so much.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the precious gift of your presence and, of course, of your time and attention.
Appreciate it.